Hi, in this video I'm going to explain how the Google Maps data extraction workflow works. The goal of this workflow is simply to obtain contact information from the data we can find on Google Maps. Alright? We will supplement this data with information we can find on the internet through Perplexity. And a very important point. Since one of the fields we are going to obtain will be email addresses, we will validate the data so that when we send out our mailings, all the addresses are valid and we don't get blocked for sending to invalid addresses, spam traps, or honeypot addresses. Alright? I'll explain a bit about how to use it by going over the main nodes. In the Set Parameters section, we are going to specify which parameters we want to use in our search. In our case, in the Q value, we are going to define what we want to search for. It's as if we were going into Google Maps and telling it, I want bookstores, and specifying the geographic area. Here I define the language in which I want those results to appear. This part here corresponds to the Google Sheet that we are going to use to store the data. In my case, I've named it Google Maps Lead. It's important that you keep that name because it's referenced, okay? And it has two tabs, one for results and another for log. Alright? To be able to save the data, you need to use this same information in the Google Sheet you create. Alright? What else? What's the next step? Here we have the JavaScript part, which simply allows us to group the requests we're making. And here we're going to have a loop, okay? Which will search for as many contacts as possible across the different pages of Google Maps. So we don't just stick with the first contacts on the first page and perform the search. For this, we're using an external service, okay? We're using the external service Serper. The nice thing about this service is that it's quite affordable, alright? You can use similar tools like Apify, where there are other search options. What's important is that when you set up the credentials, in this section here, it will ask you to enter the information. You'll need to sign up for the Serper service and use your API data here, alright? What else is there to consider? For each and every incoming request, what we are going to do is carefully check if we are currently at the very end of our entire processing flow. We'll see if there is still data to search for. We'll save all the data from the page and then start another execution, okay? Let's do a test. I've got my Google Maps here. Oh, my Google Maps, my empty Google Sheet. And I'm going to run this part of the workflow. It connects, saves the data to the Google Sheet and starts over, moving on to the next page. Do you see here how it's putting a number? These are the interaction pages that we have. There are about 10 results per page, more or less, okay? Once the flow has finished, as you can see, it's pretty fast. We have the names of the libraries, because I searched for libraries, their postal addresses, their websites, the rating, and the phone numbers. Importantly, the phone numbers don't have the international prefix. If you're doing verifications, keep that in mind, okay? And we don't have any more data. What would happen? With this crucial information, unless we were individually calling each and every one of the numerous companies, there's not much, if anything at all, that we could effectively do. To comprehensively address this significant challenge, what we've meticulously done is to create a second, distinct part of the overall workflow, which is precisely what you can clearly see here before you, where for each and every single row in our meticulously maintained record, it will diligently search for relevant and pertinent information in Perplexity. About what exactly? So, we're going to look for information such as email addresses, okay? And we're also going to search for, or create, a brief summary of the information about the companies we have. How is Perplexity going to do this? Well, it's simply going to take the company name, its postal address, and the website information and start searching, okay? You can set parameters for the elements you're interested in, okay? There are people who say, look, I'm also interested in having the LinkedIn social media accounts or anything else. If you customize this instruction, you'll see that you can get quite a lot of information, alright? So, for each row, it performs the search, extracts the data, and creates them in JSON format. And a very important point, what we're doing here is, before saving the emails we obtain to our Google Sheet, we're going to verify them, okay? In our Google Sheet, we have two columns. We have one column for email and another column called valid emails, alright? Here, if we wanted to verify emails, which is the node we're using, it also allows us to validate phone numbers. Let's delete this since we don't need it, alright? Well, now we have it ready. This way, we would verify the first three records. We come here and run it. If you want, you can connect this, okay? Once one flow finishes, you can connect it to the other. I keep them separate because I like to review the data before running verifications. Since all of this has a cost, it's a good idea to check before you launch a process, okay? What data it's returning to you and whether it's really what you're interested in. If you look here, for each of the interactions, we can see how it progresses through the node and tells us which record it's processing. In this case, it's processing record number 2. Okay, now it moves on to number 3, verifies the data, and saves them in the Excel file. It loops again, and since we've reached the end, it stops. If we go to our Excel file, we'll see that it has obtained the email addresses, verified them for us. The OK for all data means that if you put anything here, it would be delivered. So, if instead of info montaña de libres, you put abcqi montaña de libres, that email would also be delivered. Therefore, we don't recommend using it. If you go to the email verification platform, okay? At the very bottom, if you navigate here to the comprehensive API section, you will find a detailed results guide that thoroughly explains in great detail what each individual API does, or what each of the various elements within the guide specifically means, okay? Also, to use the APIs, you will have to log in for each of the services. For example, in this case, I want to use email verification. I'm going to go to APIs and I'm going to go to APIs, and I'm going to click on create a new API. As soon as I save the data, it will give me a token, okay? And this token is what we are going to use on the platform. If you carefully look, in the credentials section, I have all the necessary data meticulously stored right here, okay? So it's very important to keep in mind that in order to effectively utilize this particular flow, you will first and foremost need to successfully sign up for SERPA, which is a highly efficient and comprehensive search service that provides valuable information. It's very, very fast and very affordable. You will need access to the Perplexity API to be able to perform a deeper search, and if you want to verify the data, you'll need to sign up for email verification. If you're going to run email marketing campaigns, I recommend that you don't launch the campaign without first doing a verification. Okay? Alright then, I hope you like it. If you have any data or suggestions for improvement, you can let me know, and the idea is to keep adding more functionality to the workflow.